Hello there, this is Mick Thomas with John Broughton on Retrospectives on 3SER KC Radio.
Monday's experts always know what's the best, always tell you what you should have done.
Let's do it.
Hey, congrats on the new records. 30 years since last recording in Memphis. How did it feel going back?
It felt pretty good, you know. It's weird how your memory works. You know, if you'd asked me anything about what I'd remembered, you know, like 2 or 3 years ago, I would have said, oh, not that much. But, you know, your memory starts to unravel. And I made the decision for whatever reason to fly into Chicago and catch the train down. I just wanted to catch the city of New Orleans, the famous train. And just arriving there in the morning on the train was sort of really good. It just sort of came in at a sort of good aspect of the city, and it was very hot. And I just started recognising things, and I was on my own. And yeah, it was kind of nice. It was a nice little voyage of rediscovery, I guess. And yeah, you know, it was quite astounding how much Wally and I could remember. You know, for a bunch of guys that probably haven't treated our memories with any great respect over the years. Yeah.
Any particular reason why you chose this particular time to record there? Was there something about this batch of songs that you thought would benefit from the Memphis treatment?
No, look, it was just a suggestion that was made pretty offhandedly, and you know, like we had this new band, you know, so like it was only me and Wally were the only ones who had any knowledge or concept of what Memphis might or mightn't be able to offer us, and we just. So someone said, "Well, why don't we go back to Memphis and record with?" And basically, it came out of, you know, we were just talking about Luther Dickinson, you know, who's Jim Dickinson's son, and Jim being the guy who produced the Weddings record, Big Don't Argue, 30 years ago. And I said, someone was talking about Luther. I said, "Oh yeah, I met Luther when he was a little kid, you know, like sort of sat at their table and ate food. You know, I had a meal with him and." He used to come into the studio when we were working back there, and then out of that, you know, the sort of decision to suggest it was made, like, oh, hey, why don't we go back there and record? You know, what a great idea! And it was sort of like, well, why not? And yeah, at every step of the way, it just seemed like a good idea. You know, like it just seemed exciting. And look, it's not to say that just because we're old guys and we've made a stack of records over the years that we need to find some reason to get us excited, but it just did seem exciting from start to finish, and it did sort of beg the question, which Wally and I, you know, sort of put to each other at various points when we were over there, why in the hell has it taken us so long to get back there? And we just heralded a period of uncertainty, but it also heralded, weirdly, our most successful period, because straight after that was Difficult Loves, and Father's Day was a hit, and Step In, Step Out got some airplay, and then Monday's Experts got some airplay and was a minor hit, and we sort of had this period. So all of a sudden we made those, you know, 2 or 3 records that were made here in town, in Melbourne, and, you know, before we'd looked at it, we'd sort of got on the circuit, you know, we're a biggish band, and one thing led to another, and then probably before you were looking at it, you know, we were finding good reasons for that band to break up, and then so all of a sudden, you know, there's been another 20 years since then, and I know that when I first reconvened with Mark Wallace, because he didn't play with me for 10 years after the Weddings, we talked about doing a record, and we were talking to Darren Hamlin, and I really liked the idea of Darren producing a record because he's, you know, just comes from an interesting angle on things, and I'd really loved the few records that Darren had made at that point. And Darren said, well, why don't we go to Portland, Oregon to do a record? So we went and did a record there, and I remember when we were there talking about other places that he'd recorded in the States, and I remember thinking, well, yeah, why haven't we gone back to Memphis? And then like I say, it was just brought up by a band member this time around, and we said, well, hell, that's a good idea, let's do it. And, you know, it's just a little 1%er, really. You just get, I mean, I think probably one of the most significant things is going away to do a record, you know, that everyone's sort of, everyone's busy these days, aren't they? You know, like everyone's got stuff on. And, you know, even little fortuitous things that happened this time around, which I think you make work in your favour. Is like one thing, we didn't have any internet at the studio we were working at, which is hallelujah, you know, because I didn't have to tell everyone to get off their bloody phones all day, you know. When one thing, like about a month before we left, we were just organising accommodation, and we just shock horror realised that the studio that the engineer wanted to work at wasn't in Memphis, but it was in Mississippi. It was about 45 minutes from Memphis. So we made the decision to actually stay in Memphis, which was just fantastic because it meant that every morning we got up as a band, hopped in a car, drove for 45 minutes, and just full of expectation and things. And then at night we got to sort of debrief before we can sort of get back and hit the bars of Memphis, you know. And it sort of meant that we weren't in a position to be sending out for alcohol or pizzas or anything like that was going to distract us. So we turn up every day with basically the makings of some good sandwiches, and that was lunch, you know what I mean? So we get there about 10 o'clock, we'd work till 1 or 2, you know, make some lunch, sit around, then probably work till, you know, 5 or 6, and we'd hop in the car, and by the time we hit town, we were pretty much, you know, ravenous, and we'd hit a bar and have some tea and talk about, you know, what a great band we are, you know. It was a good recipe, you know. And a lot of those things are just purely mechanical things which would be available to you here, except for the fact that if you're in Melbourne, well, you're going to be peeling off. Everyone's going to be peeling off. Oh, someone's coming around tonight. I've got to go and meet someone. I've got to go and do something. I've got to go and do that. Someone's on the phone. They've got some crisis at home, you know. All of a sudden, all that distraction. But the fact is, those, you know, 4 or 5 people that are in that band at a given point in time, they're all there because they're good players, because they've got something to contribute to, you know, that music. And given the chance, they will be able to contribute to that music. But all those distractions are the things that are going to stop you every time. You know? And there's no overstating the case that those distractions of modern life are making life really hard, and the probably biggest one is the internet, you know.
Yeah. It is a more expensive and time-consuming procedure to make the trip overseas to record. Does it create a little bit of pressure on yourself to justify the expense?
Oh yeah, like it's been nothing but a headache, you know, from start to finish, like, yeah, on 20 different levels, and, you know, yeah, it hasn't sort of, like, everything around this record's been bloody difficult, except for the 15 days that we were in Memphis, which were just like magical days. It was magic, but right up till the start, it was just nothing but you know, problems. And virtually since we've finished, there's been a fair amount of you know, drama and stuff getting the thing out. But look, since it's been out, it's been great, and you know, I've felt, look, and not to put anything on any of the last bunch of albums that we've made, but I just don't think I've felt a record like this, you know, since way back in the weddings, that's been that accepted by people, and people kind of feel, maybe, you know, a lot of the people that have been coming back on board, and I just think this is just a purely a technical and a chronological thing, but our figures have been quite strong in the last few years. I think it's by virtue of a lot of the fans having older kids, you know, and all of a sudden they're coming back to it, and whether it be via the streaming thing, people have been able to sort of go online and stream what we do and just see that we're still kind of pretty much ploughing the same furrow we always have been. But people have been coming back on board, but people seem really ready for this album, and I've just been getting that really good feeling as we go around the country, and as we're, you know, 2/3 of the way around now, that there seems to be like this really good reception of these songs, you know. So yeah, that's been very positive.
Now, Kevin Houston, who was Jim Dickinson's engineer back in the day, took the reins on this one. Was his approach to recording you pretty similar to how you remember Jim?
Not quite as idiosyncratic as Jim, but having said that, you know, I had to go and do a demo with a young guy I've been working with in Geelong. It was the first time I've been in the studio since I've been in Memphis, and I kind of realised something about all the studios in Memphis that we worked at, and Jim's studio in particular, and Kevin in particular, is that what you might call the Mojo Factor was just really, really high, and that's in terms of, like, you're walking into a studio and every literally every mic stand or microphone's got a story attached to it, or there's pictures on the wall, there's all this weird stuff. And going into a studio that was very, very clinical and, like being in a hospital, I realised that, technically it might be quite good, but it had a Mojo Factor of 0, the studio that I found myself in back here. Was you go to Jim's studio and it's just the equipment, on a technical level, is not much at all to speak of, but the place is just stuffed full of old guitars that are made out of, oil containers and, drum kits that are made out of this and that, and zebra pelts hanging on the wall, and weird paintings, and lots of news clippings, and, old snake skins hanging from the light fittings, and, it was like being in a scene in True Detective, a lot of it, and then even we went to some other studios, like we did a few days at Royal, which is Willie Mitchell's old studio, which is, just a studio that's so full of history and got so much in the way of just really, great old equipment, which, every time you pick up a guitar or you plug into an amp, it's, got some story attached to it. And then we did a couple of days mixing at Sam Phillips, which is, just got, it's just, the place is just full of ghosts, and so, you're sitting at a little bar upstairs and they say, oh, I see that cigarette burn there on the bar, Johnny Cash did that, and you just, so you're just constantly assaulted with all this stuff. And Kevin was like a much more passive person in a lot of ways than, say, Jim. But Kevin was a guy who worked with Jim a lot, and he could certainly be. He wasn't trying to impress you the way Jim could impress you by just being this crazy old Southern maverick. But you could certainly feel the undercurrent there of someone who'd spent a lot of time working with Jim. And the other thing about it is that while a lot of those people there have this sort of sense of being Southern mavericks, they're very technically adept at what they're doing, and they really do know what they're doing. So whether that's technically adept as musicians or as studio engineers, you're not talking about someone you're going to be able to put anything over. They really do. They know what the equipment does.
Looking at some of the songs, is there for you a common thread or a theme that links the songs together at all?
Look, there was an early idea that I had this idea to call the record to something to do with world music, but not world as in WORLD, as in whirl, as in whirlpool, but just because there seemed to be a lot of songs about swimming and rock pools and stuff like that. So I think someone said 4 of the songs have got direct aquatic references, and that was just sort of the way it was sort of panning out. So look, I think more than that, the real unifying element of the songs for me was kind of a sense of look, it's weird to put this, but Dave, the drummer, was asking me about the narration on the song "Anything You Recognise," and he said, "Well, what were you getting at with that narration, or the actual tone of it?" And I said, "Well, apart from the fact that so I'm sort of thinking in my head that most spoken word hip hop music has this kind of emotional range of 0, and it just seems to have this kind of affectation of this kind of that people are always worldly and a bit surly and a bit just got this kind of thing. I wanted this affectation that it would be like told by Daryl Kernigan from the Castle.
Ah, yeah.
Like there's this sense of wonder in everything, and that's what I kind of wanted, this sense of troubled wonder. That's a youthful troubled wonder. So that's the kid in Murder Town, or then it's like someone going to Southeast Asia, or even Aqua Profunda. There's this kind of just sense of wonder in everything, and not world weary, and even Bright Sunshine, which is the most complex of all the songs on the record. But I just had this kind of feeling of like acceptance of the way other people receive things, and not saying that I agree with people, but just acceptance that other people are going to have an opinion and come to things in this certain way, and so I guess there's this kind of funny little, almost contradictory thing, but in a sense of wonder and a sense of acceptance, But but yeah, I just think that sense of youthful wonder was kind of like the unifying aspect to me.
Talking about that song, anything you recognised? Was that spoken word element always going to be part of that song, or is that something that sort of panned out in the studio and the recording process?
No, it was always going to be a part of it, and it was really, really interesting because it's a very different way of recording, because you're just sort of setting up a beat and you're setting up this chorus, and then you're cutting and pasting at an engineering level, and that wasn't something that I was ever able to conceive of doing, because technically speaking, I've never been a person who could have conjured that sort of thing up. But being with an engineer who could do it, in a heartbeat. Look, weirdly enough, because it's in a way one of the tracks I'm proudest of on the record, but as a way of making music, it's something I find really dissatisfying. Like it's really just. I was sort of joking. I can say, well, hip hop people seem so unhappy all the time because it's bloody awful. I reckon because you just don't get to play, and we're playing that song now so well, we're playing that arrangement, but it's such a convoluted way to reach an arrangement, But I always had this idea. I had that chorus, and then I just had this idea of this ramble that would go into a very strict metered, like what you'd call a B verse. But I sort of wanted it to be rambling, and therefore, the verse lengths would be all quite different, and a little bit off the cuff, which is funny because the more you play it, then the less off the cuff it is, and because you've got to have really strong signal words to the band to be able to change and go through the intervals and get them, at the same time, obviously. So it's just an interesting way to make music, but not one that I'm, even vaguely tempted to pursue. But look, having listened to say things like whether it be the Aerial Maps or which is a band from Sydney that I really love that do a lot of spoken word stuff, or even just sort of John Cooper Clarke's or Attila the Stockbrokers, people who do deal in spoken word, and I do love the idea of it, and I love it as long as it's got some emotional range, which I find that so much hip hop doesn't have emotional range for me, and that's maybe why those classic things like whether it be De La Soul or say when Grandmaster Flash came out, those first things, it just seemed really promising. But it just seems to be, by and large, I don't find that much in it that has, much in the way of emotional range for me. Not, whatever anyone else wants to get out of it, it's fine. But I guess I would definitely come at the idea of doing spoken word stuff again, and I really like live, just occasionally just, going into that and doing some spoken word stuff. But, yeah, it's just an odd way to make music, if you ask me.
Yeah. And the record kicks off with Boxing Day Drive. I believe there was quite a process involved in the writing of that song.
That was very convoluted. That was, certainly of all the songs that I co-wrote on the record, that was the one that was the most co-written, if you know what I mean, like in terms of, here's an idea. Let's do this, let's do that. Nah, that's not right. Let's try it like this. It just seemed to go forever. And again, sort of a strange way for me to write a song. But, it's like you've got to sort of go with it and run with it when you do that. And that's what I think I sort of arrived at, even with back to energy recognising that's the task you've set yourself. So you've got to sort of stick with it. So yeah, it was certainly from the opening sort of words of that song, which, I mean, the tune was pretty much all there, and then I just had that, and I started writing it on Boxing Day, so it just seemed like the most obvious thing in the world that it would be called Boxing Day and would start with the words Boxing Day. But then, it's sort of like, it was like an exercise in songwriting, really, from there on, like, what do you do with it? And, it would be probably a pretty good exercise for, if you were sort of trying to teach songwriting, as much as it is possible to teach songwriting, which I'm not sure how possible it is to teach songwriting, really. But it would be like a good exercise to say, well, this is what's. Look, I've just done a thing recently, like the most recent song I've written, and this does feel like a jaded thing to say, but I guess in my case, again, often it feels like I need a reason to write a song, and it was just this photographer, an old photographer buddy in Sydney, said he's doing this exhibition, and he just had a bunch of photos that he said he wanted people to use to, as kind of impetus to write songs. But his whole thing was that each photo had a caption, and the one rule is that you had to use the caption in the song. And I said, well, that's the kind of task I can really live with, It's just a really, really, really interesting thing. It's really definite. It's like you're just going to be able to tick that box and get on with it. And so I think in terms of Boxing Day, it was pretty much like that. Then it just becomes like, the major question any given person will ask you about songwriting is, what do you start with, the lyrics or the words? And my answer is always the same: is you start with whatever you start with. You're going to have a line that you like, or a chorus, or a title, or you might just have a riff, or you might have a chord progression, you might have a beat. Like there could be anything you start with, but taking it that a song is a combination of melody, rhythm, and words, that you're going to start with one, and then the other one's going to have to catch up pretty quick,
Yeah.
But like, it's not the first time someone's written a whole melody and then had to put words to it. It's not the first time someone's taken a poem and written music to it, So often one wins the race before the other one started, and it doesn't mean that's good or bad, but it's getting them to combine in a way that's sort of meaningful and coherent is what creates a song. So Boxing Day was one that, between the two of us that wrote it, was just one bit first. Nah, that's not right. So it was back and forth, but yeah, very kind of convoluted. But most of them less so.
Now, you went down the crowdfunding path initially with this one, with Pledge Music, who I hear are having some financial issues, which have left some artists out of pocket. Were you able to get out unscathed?
Yeah, I was. I was very, very lucky because, we'd initially planned to have it up and running for Christmas, and then just one thing or another, I ended up just not doing that. So we just, when we had the EP coming out at Christmas, we just did a little kind of in-house sort of pre-order campaign, which is fine, so we postponed the whole Pledge Music thing till I think it was mid-January. And the whole thing with Pledge is that people pledge money, and they don't actually have their bank accounts deducted until you reach 100% of your target, and they give you what your target should be based on the size of your mailing list, right? So when I finally could get the thing launched in mid-January, like we kind of hit 80% of our target in the first 2 or 3 days, and then some friends in England contacted me and they said, get out while you can. They said, Pledge is going to go under. And that, because basically they're a bunch of people who'd actually hit 100% of their target, or everyone's cards had been deducted, or, all the fans had given them their money and they weren't seeing a cent of it. And so it took me about a week to come to the decision. And as the week went on, I could just see it creeping up, and my friend who initially contacted me again. He said, Mick, you've just cracked 90%. He said, you've just got to get out now, because he said, if you hit 100% and everyone's cards get deducted, you've lost your money. So by the time I got out, I think it was about 94%. And, the thing I can't be too grateful for is not the punters were just, everyone was really kind of, faithful is not the word. They were just really trusting, and I just said, look, this is going to finish. I want you all to cancel your transactions now and come over and just, do the same thing, and I'm just going to set it up through PayPal. And it was really messy and awkward, and it took me ages to get all the stuff out to people, but I did it, and it was just it was just a week of really late nights sitting out. It's just a weird realization that I'd spent a whole lot of money a couple of years ago making a recording studio in my backyard and making it soundproof. And the main thing of it being soundproof now was that I could use one of those tape guns that you get from the post office to be taking up packages late at night, so that I wasn't keeping the household awake. And that's a very funny realisation for a musician to make, that your beautiful little home studio is basically become a mailing room. But, at the moment, I'm just about to repossess it.
Just the same, though, it'd be a shame if this situation with Pledge Music puts artists off the idea of crowdfunding, because when it's done properly, it's a great way for people to get their work out there.
Look, theoretically, I've had a few people ask me what they thought of it, and it's look, I guess what I suffer from is always having wanted to be in a band, the sort of band that everyone hangs around and does all stuff together and all chips in, and the fact is that's not what my life is. It's me. When I use the word "we" all the time, I say I will get that out to you, or we're struggling a bit in the mailroom. What I mean is it's me. So the guy that's writing the songs and singing them is the guy sitting up with just going through Sharpie after Sharpie and getting cramp in his head. So like when I say things like, I can write out a song lyric and then you go, oh my God, someone's requested that one. So I'm sort of writing out those lyrics, and then it's a hell of a lot of work, is what I'm trying to say. In short. So look, I mean, I'll do some version of it down the track, and I'm nothing but thankful for the record label I'm signed to. They gave me some money. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was exactly the right amount. In that I don't want. With the way sales and streaming has gone, I don't need any bigger debt than what I've already accrued. And I've never been one of those people that sort of saw debt as some way of creating leverage with record companies. So I know there's always been artists that go, well, just keep booking it up, and it just gives them an incentive to keep promoting. And I just think there's a point at which that just doesn't work for me as a concept. So Bloodlines have been fantastic, and Mushroom have been fantastic with this record. So, but the fact is that money is not enough to get a band to Memphis, and I'm still pretty intent on wherever the next album might take me, and that'll probably be sometime next year or the year after. But if we decide we're going to go to Timbuktu to record it, that we should, and I'll have to find the money somehow.
Talk about a couple of the other songs. Bright Sunshine, I believe that's the oldest song on the record.
Yeah, it's a pretty old song. It certainly was there well before we did the previous album, which was 2012, so 2011. So I reckon it's a good 15 years old. It's just a matter of getting it right and getting it to a point where it was sort of saying what I really wanted it to say, but I feel that we got it there, and it's sort of saying a complex thing. I think is more one of the issues with that song, and I was getting at before about acceptance of people having different ways of looking at things, and it really comes down to something as simple as myself and Michael Barclay, who was the drummer for years and years in the weddings and after the weddings. We did some tours in Europe, and one of them we went to visit the concentration camp at Dachau, which is now a war memorial. And we came out, and there's always Italian school kids sitting around just goofing off like school kids on their phones and whatever. And Michael sort of was sort of quite condemning of them and saying, "Oh, look at them, they don't give a stuff. It hasn't really affected them, the whole thing, blah, blah, blah." And I said, well, there could be any amount of reason for that. And it just didn't I couldn't really get why it didn't worry me. And then, when I was just trying to finish it off as a song, it was brought to my attention that there was a German artist who'd done this whole thing about American school kids who'd visited war memorials and taken photos of themselves doing dumb things on these war memorials, whether they're sort of jumping off things or doing yoga or, whatever. And I just think, well, part of the problem there is the fact that everything has to be bloody well photographed these days anyway. But I sort of thought about it, and I thought, well, I don't really hold with people being disrespectful, someone's gravesite or, that sort of sacrilegious thing. But at the same time, kids are kids, and I kind of just sort of think what anyone wants to get out of these things is what they should get out of it. You know, I can't say that anyone should get out of it what I get out of it. So I just came to this conclusion that, you know, it's the sun was shining and the kids were there. You know, it's just kids, you know. So that's what I kind of, it sounds like a sort of a glib, simple thing, but I kind of think in a way, I just said, Michael, wasn't that what they fought the war for? You know, so kids could be kids and people didn't have to have this you know, overriding sort of politicized view of the world, you know. I mean, I just think that's kind of what even rock and roll was based on, is that people would just be, you know, a bit less conscious of their kind of their lives in any, you know, traditional political sense. So, yeah, that's what I sort of came up with. But it's trying to unify a whole lot of ideas into one thing, but hopefully when people hear the song, they'll just get the whole thing, you know, that it just is the word bright sunshine over and over, and it's all about these kids and about sort of just not getting too bogged down with things, I think, and, you know, responding to things in a really natural way as opposed to a premeditated way.
Tell us about River again. I believe looks like it's a reference to our beloved Yarra River.
Yeah, that was each year Johnny Von Goes, who's like a Melbourne sort of dude, he runs gigs and he's a Triple R DJ, and he'd often have this gig called the Brown River gig, and it was just a bunch of people singing songs about the Yarra, and there'd been an article in the newspaper about you know, that every few years someone comes up with a plan to build a swimming pool in the Yarra, like right in town there, you know, so a floating swimming pool. And it's not as stupid as it sounds. Like they've got them in, you know, in the river in New York, and I was certainly swum in one overseas somewhere. It was in Vienna. I think, you know, you can swim in the Danube right in town there. And, it's not as stupid as it might sound. And Johnny just showed me this article, and he said, what a good idea for a song. It writes itself, doesn't it? And I said, well, it does if someone else writes it, it does. So it just seemed like a good idea. And then the sort of template I had in my head was Ewan McCall's song called Sweet Thames Float Softly. So I had a real call and response thing in it. So that gives you sort of the form of the song, and we just basically went from there. Yeah.
The Catalpa is a song that I believe you had plans to record on your last trip to Memphis. Was that always a lock to be included this time around?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I just, you know, it sort of seemed bittersweet that we didn't get back there and record it with Jim, because the first time we went to Memphis, what happened was, you know, the record company, like, was this Warner, so back in the late 80s, were really keen for us to work with basically an American producer. They thought that would give, you know, they kind of had this idea that would make the weddings a more kind of international commodity. And so, you know, we had a list of people we looked at, and Jim was the one we focused on straight away, but Warner's had this idea that, you know, I should go there and just test the waters with Jim and see how we might get on, you know. So basically, it was a couple of months before we recorded, and I just went through Memphis with my partner at the time, and stayed in a hotel and went around to Jim's house for dinner and just hung out with him a bit and just sat there with an acoustic guitar, just played him a lot of songs. And what's only occurred to me this time around, and certainly well since then, is even though Jim's sort of known as the guy who played piano on, you know, Wild Horses for the Rolling Stones, and, you know, was this kind of rock and roll guy, it's only occurred to me, you know, in retrospect, how much into folk music he was, and how that was the side of the weddings that he really loved. And I was just too, you know, I don't know what, stupid to say it at the time there, but I know that I did play him a lot of folk songs, and that he was kind of interested in Australian folk music. And I played him that song, and I remember him just saying, yeah, it's just and he's a rebel, you know, so that he just, and I was sort of explaining about rebel songs and where they were sort of coming from, sort of politically and culturally in terms of Australian music. And, you know, supposedly, according to Thomas Keneally, that was the first song in Australia that was banned. So, which, you know, totally suited Jim. So the plan was that we would record that, and I just remember right at the end going, damn, we forgot to record that. Jim just sort of laughing and saying, well, we'll get it next time. Right.
Now you're in the middle of the tour at the moment, launching the album. From your observations, what are the songs that are going down best with the crowd of the new songs?
Well, anything you recognise is probably the one that's worth killing it, but not only because, but one of the big factors in that is we've just been finishing with it every night and just saying, well, we've just got to be really strong about making sure that the new songs are played and that are put in really strong positions where people are forced to, really give some attention, give them the time of the day, because otherwise, if you're just always trying to slide the song, everything in around away and Father's Day and, those half a dozen songs which we kind of tend to play, if you play them as if they're unimportant, they'll become unimportant. But this time around, we just said, no, we've really got to put our foot down and just not let these things get away from us, because, it sort of makes us pretty sad that, so the Last of the Tourists, which came out in 2012, which we only really play one song off that these days, which is Gallipoli Rosemary, which was always seen as the important song off that record. But there were other good songs on that record, and, they sort of deserve a go, and, it's, look, every band that's ever, lasted longer than a couple of albums has had to deal with the same thing, You've only got so many songs in your set list, and you've got to work out which ones are going to get the nod on any given night. But but we just said, like anything you recognise, it's a big song. We've got to put it in a big spot, So we're finishing with it each night. And that's been fantastic. River Again's been really good because I think it's got a really good. The vocal thing brings everyone into it. I think Murder Town's really strong. I think Died in Ballarat's just interesting because of the subject matter. So people like it. They like the circus sort of riff in it. So they're all songs that have got quite a strong distinctive element to them. On any given song, whether it be this is the one about the circus that went bust in Ballarat. That's the one with the river again, with the call and response answer. Boxing Day is the one with the mandolin riff at the start that sort of jumps in. They've all got like an element that might make it distinctive from any other given song. So as a bunch of songs, and I think they're so far so good. Like it's been very well accepted, and songs that I think are going to become sort of favourites pretty quickly. So we've been nothing but gratified so far.
Fantastic. And just before I let you go, what's in your books for the rest of the year and after this tour's over anyway?
We'll finish this tour in May. Basically, I've got this like a weird, this is one of my crazy concoctions, but I've got this graphic novel I've been working on with a cartoonist sort of the album. So it's like all the songs explained, but in graphic novel form, and then a whole lot of look, I hate the word blog, because blog usually means to me someone who couldn't think of anything to write about, writing about nothing. But a whole lot of, I guess you call them blogs about the album. So this whole thing's going to tell the story of the album. So it's going to be like a pretty richy looking comic book. So I've got to get that out. We've got a whole lot of the as part of the pledge campaign, we took a whole lot of song requests to record. So we've got 16 songs to record there. So that's certainly going to keep me busy for another month or two. And so by the time we're sort of arcing up towards Christmas, we finish in May, June, July, or August. So actually I'll have a couple of months off just to try and cook some other stuff up. But I think those two projects, which are basically directly related to the album, will be well underway and hopefully be part of us going back out on the road at Christmas time, which I think if we can sort of retie Christmas back in with this album, as opposed to saying, well, the album's finished, we're just back to playing the same stuff, well, then our job's done, because we started at Christmas last year. So, it's just too easy to to let albums go. You bring them out and you do a tour, and it's sort of hard. The airplay doesn't really exist anymore. You're just sitting there on the internet trying to convince people that your record's still got some legs or still some relevancy. But I think there's a lot of things we can do like that are going to keep it interesting and fresh. So. There's other things I might do. I might be sort of cooking up some other new things, or writing some new songs, heaven forbid. But, I think it'll still be, what I'm trying to get at is there's a couple of little projects, but they're definitely spin-offs from Coldwater DFU that will hopefully feed back into it by the year's end.
Fantastic. Hey Mick, thanks again for catching up, and congratulations on a wonderful batch of new songs. It's funny, first time we spoke was just after Donkey Serenade came out, and we were talking about you just done a whole lot of mass mail outs then too. So time passes, but things
funny, yeah.
Time passes, but things stay the same.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, thanks again, Mick. All the best.
All right. Thanks for your time.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.